The topic is organic food. Me personally, coming from someone who only buys organic, I don't really have to worry about the extra processes that regular processed meats go through. All of my nuts are usually organic, my fruits, I don't have to worry about the dyes that they put in it, all of the sprays that they use in it in the supermarket. So it's actually a really healthy life choice, and I think everybody should make it.
We are visiting Uptown Manhattan, where a large portion of the community is African American or Latino. Statistics show that communities of low-income minorities tend to have higher rates of obesity because they have less healthy options available to them, or they don't have the income to purchase healthy foods. We will talk directly with people from the community and hear what they have to say about the diabetes epidemic in New York City.
Do you consider yourself a healthy eater?
I would say I'm not entirely a healthy eater, but I am health conscious about what I put into my body, but I can be better at deciding on what foods I should eat.
I try to eat healthy, but then a lot of times because of the money, I end up buying things I really shouldn't.
I do like to cook healthy. He can attest to that. I am very cautious about what I consume. I very rarely buy pre-processed food or ready to make or easy to make foods. I cook everything from scratch, but that's also how I grew up.
Diabetes sí, yo soy diabética y yo me gustaría comer comida orgánica siempre, pero a veces yo no tengo para comprar la comida orgánica y tengo que comprarla de la otra. Yo siempre voy a comprar la comida orgánica cuando puedo.
So when you go shopping for your groceries, do you bother checking the labels?
Of course, I do. Before, a couple of years ago, asked me this question, I would say no. But now I check labels because I feel like, a lot of things can be advertised on the box or the bag or the bottle. And you look at it, it's organic, or you have to really turn the box or the bottle over to see the labels because that's really what matters,
But as far as the labels, they could be clear. A lot of things like you get a yogurt that says 0 fat, but then it says it consists of xanthan gum. Like we all know that xanthan gum is made in chewing gum and yoga mats nowadays. So why do you make it available for us? So there's only so much selection that we can make as consumers based on habits and education. The rest comes from our producers. So.
Are the labels confusing in any way you feel like, or do you?
Well, I feel like if they're confusing, if the ingredients are too hard to read or understand, you should stray away from them.
The most thing you really have to look for is the saturated fats, the carbonated fats. As long as it's low, you're perfectly fine. As long as it's unsaturated, you're perfectly fine. And trans fat, everybody stay away from it. It's unhealthy.
Roughly 1 of 8 New Yorkers has diabetes. We're now going to visit downtown Manhattan, where the Union Square Market is taking place.
I have in the last about 3 years I've been eating mainly paleo. I cheat a lot, but yeah, so it's basically just nothing in a box: fruits and vegetables, no grains, no legumes, no beans, and yeah, it's just essentially just full fat everything. So instead of no skim milk, just no low fat yogurt, but full fat, and it's everything that's less processed, essentially.
Well, as a matter of fact, after I had my daughter, I became, when I was pregnant, I became a diabetic. I had the gestational diabetes. And after, it stuck with me. So I did have to change a lot of how I eat. Like before, I never really used to eat vegetables and fruits. Not so much, but now I incorporate it in which I'm having that a few times a day. Definitely, incorporating it into dinner, that I have to have more of your greens, So, I think health-wise, if people are conscious about their health and they know what's going on, if you want to live a long, healthy life, you have to change what you consume,
I totally understand that part because, there are times when you go to the grocery store and you're looking at the eggs, for example, and you've got organic brown eggs that are going to be like $6 or $7 for a dozen, and then you look at the regular white eggs and they're like $3 or $2, and you're like, why do I have to pay an extra $5 for something that's supposed to be better for me? Which I totally understand the point of paying extra for it, but at the same time, I understand where people financially don't have the money for it, But at the end of the day, we just have to try as hard as we can to go towards it. And then the other thing about it is that with anyone because it's organic, we don't have to label it a lot higher in pricing from everybody else. We should make it more affordable so we can capitalize on the volume versus, just the name organic.
Mount Sinai Hospital sits strategically between these two communities. They take patients from the richest zip codes to one of the poorest zip codes in the nation.
My name is Hagen. I'm a professor in the Department of Developmental and Regenerative Biology. I am the Associate Dean of the School of Biomedical Sciences, and I am the Director of the Center for Personalized Cancer Therapeutics. So my laboratory takes an unusual approach. We use Drosophila, fruit flies, to study the complexities of human disease, especially cancer and diabetes. In the case of diabetes, we just feed them a high sugar diet, and they show many of the problems we do. They become insulin resistant, their heart fails, their kidneys fail, their liver fails in ways that look a lot like us, but they're easier to get at what the causes of those are. And we also study cancer, where we build complex tumors, and we even look at the interface between diabetes and cancer by feeding our cancer models a high sugar diet and showing that can drive tumors. I don't specifically eat organic foods. I'm a scientist, and I'm not driven by a theory about food. I'm just driven by data. So if I find that organic food is healthier and I see that data, I'm all in, but I haven't seen that data. And so I don't make that distinction that I know others do, because that fits more into their sort of lifestyle and what their personal ethics are. My personal ethics are to make food and then eat food. And if I find that it's healthier to have something that is not organic, I'll eat that. So I just go by the data. I'm a scientist.
We're in the Union Square Market here, and I have the EBT station with...
I'm Arlene. I'm a market manager. I run the EBT station here. The EBT stands for Electronic Benefit Transfer, so it's people on public assistance, food stamps, so that they're able to use their food stamps here at the market. So I do pretty much, it's like an ATM. I swipe their card, and then I give them tokens in exchange for them then to shop at the different vendors. I mean, I think there's a stereotype in which, you would think there's a certain kind of person that only gets food stamps. But here, surprisingly enough, I come across people that you wouldn't expect but do have it, because it's all depending on what you pay as in rent and what your income is. So you could live down here and, still not make enough to afford to pay for your groceries for the whole month, that you still get the public assistance. I do run markets in the uptown, because I ran a market in the Bronx by the courthouses, by Yankee Stadium. And, people do want to eat healthy. It's just there's not so much available within their budget, But there is, but mostly when the season is at its peak, when there's so much more that you can get. Because right now it's mostly just root vegetables. Now as spring is coming, you're getting more things into the market. But I think it's, it is location and, what people can afford to buy.
So first of all, if it was an easy problem and there was one simple solution, we would have done that, okay? Because, the U.S. has spent a crazy amount of money trying to deal with diabetes to, some effect, actually. We're tailing off a little bit, but not much effect. So it's not going to be easy. It's going to be, you're going to address it in 1,000 different ways. But I think if the community can show by these examples that it cares about health, it cares about your health, my health, then I think people take that more seriously, right? If the ethos in the community is, let's eat everything we want, we'll take a pill when we get sick and we'll all be better, or I'm just too busy to think about that. If that's the ethos of the community, then that's what people will think. It's the job of some people who set up these programs to remind us to make a decision. Do I care about my diet, right? Those are decisions you have to make, because you could spend that effort on other things. You just have to decide that health is really important because it has a long-term impact.
Yeah, like I love cabbage. You know, like I said, coming down here, I used to get them from the man to be on the corner. But in what they have in the store there, a lot of times it's, oh God, it's terrible.
I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, I think, no, it's a great question. So what's the role of the government? The government has a few roles. It's not going to solve this problem. I think that's pretty clear. Again, if the government could have pulled the switch, they've spent enough money now that that switch would have been pushed. But there's no financial incentive for companies to do the research that's required to understand diabetes. Nobody's going to pay a company to do that research. So that's going to be up to government-funded research. What is causing diabetes? Why is it exploded? Why is it that some ethnic groups are at higher risk than others? Is it strictly community, or are there genetic aspects to it? These are all things that we don't fully understand, and it's complicated, but the government has a strong role in that. They have a strong role in understanding why. They have a strong role in making decisions, you know, in some of these programs that you pointed out, that maybe aren't simple money makers for a company, but we as a society have decided is a priority for us, which is, you know, health of the community. So the government has a big role, but they don't have the only role to play in that. We also, as a community, are going to have to make decisions at the grassroots about what we care about for ourselves and our neighbors. Can the mayor have a direct effect on the rates of diabetes? So I want to remind you that Bloomberg tried to ban sugary sodas, right? And as you saw, everybody were somewhere between freaking out and laughing at this, right? And a lot of jokes were made about it. But you can see, you know, if you see these rates of obesity, you have to credit the guy for trying to do something, right? But I think that points to the difficulty of what to do. You run into issues of freedom of choice, you know, individual responsibility, right, which is one of the bedrocks that America's been built on. And then that conflicts with, you know, you are your brother's keeper, we are a community. That's a difficult thing to run. Should de Blasio go to corporations and prevent them from making 64-ounce drinks, which I can tell you, if you drink enough of those, you're basically guaranteed to become obese. And if I know that, and I watch you do that, should I stop you from doing that, right? Or should I give you the right to abuse yourself, basically? You know, I have knowledge that you may not have. On the other hand, I'm not your parent, right? You have your own responsibility. So that is just a complete quagmire. So I think what they've done, in Manhattan, New York has been one of the leaders in this, is they try to hit a middle ground where they give you information. So now you're starting to see all these calorie counts on all the menus, right? With the hope that slowly over time, much like the warnings on cigarette packages, slowly over time it sort of works on you. Go, my God, that's 1,200 calories. I had no idea this is supposed to be a healthy thing, right? I mean, if you ever look at the calorie count on a cup of yogurt, it'll blow your mind. So I think that's the middle ground. There are limits to what the government can do because people are very resistant to having the government tell them what they're allowed to do.
You have the proof. I mean, your flies, you feed your flies.
Oh, I can tell you.
High fructose. No,
if we feed the flies a high sugar diet, they'll become obese and become diabetic, guaranteed. High fat diet doesn't happen. But high sugar diet, and if we put tumors in, the tumors, I can tell you, if you drink one of those every day, I can tell you what's going to happen to you. It's like watching somebody on a train that's heading off the cliff, and it's like, well, why don't I just stop the train, right? But if you're running the train to the cliff, then it gets into questions of why should I tell you not to run that train right off the cliff? So it's frustrating. And you know, there's always the counter argument, which is, well, if you drink a 64-ounce soda every day, it's not just about you anymore. It's about me because I'm going to pay all the insurance costs of trying to deal with all of your diseases, right? You're affecting your family, you're affecting everyone else. When you drop dead of a heart attack at 45 years old, that has consequences. So it's not like everybody is on an island either. It's a decision that society's going to have to make. So that's a great example of how complicated this is. So, you know, the majority or most people who are diabetic are obese. However, weirdly enough, the vast majority of people who are obese, more than 2/3, never become diabetic. Okay? So think about that a second. That means that the majority of people have plenty of resistance to prevent diabetes. So diabetes is a very clear definition. You're insulin resistant. It causes very specific problems. It's really quite different from obese. So it's not simply the case that you get heavier, and then boom, you become diabetic. In some countries, for example, in India, very little weight gain leads immediately to diabetes. And diabetes is absolutely rampant there, despite the fact that the average weight is not nearly what it is in the US, suggesting that genetically, a lot of people in India are prone to diabetes. So what's that about? So the deeper you look into this problem, the more complicated it gets, basically. So the relationship between obesity and diabetes is unclear. On the other hand, you see very few skinny people that are type 2 diabetic. The relationship of smoking to diabetes is complicated because, for example, people who smoke lose weight, all right? So it's a complicated, and when they stop smoking, they gain weight, right? So the relationship between them, again, gets really complicated. Right? So it's not as simple, you do this and then that happens. And that, of course, makes studying it really annoying.
Well, as everybody knows, there's two types. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is mainly common amongst children, which is juvenile diabetes, and type 2 diabetes is usually common in adults over the age of, I believe, 35 to 45. Diabetes and unhealthy eating actually go hand in hand. If you fix your diet, you actually regulate your blood sugar, which people don't know. Stay away from candy, sweets, anything, again, high in saturated fats you stay away from because it raises your cholesterol, which eventually leads to heart diseases, and that also is a factor of diabetes as well. So healthy is the way to go.
Diabetes is a complicated problem. I know every problem is complicated. A problem with diabetes is it's actually really complicated because it's no single organ. You know, in a tumor, you know what you're studying. It's that lump that's growing up. In diabetes, it's a whole body problem where the whole body network shifts into disease. And so the problem that scientists have with that, because the way science is set up is you have all these individual labs, is everybody wants to grab onto a little piece of it and study that with great focus, and there's a lot of that. But it's hard to know if I've taken apart this little piece of it, what that means in terms of the patient, right? Is that going to make them better? If I figure out this part of the kidney and how that's getting damaged, you know, I'm contributing one little piece, but is that going to help the patient or not? Now, there are other people that whip out the computers and try to model the whole thing in one shot. The problem there is you're making so many guesses and estimations that, you know, that details do count. So I think right now, more than many diseases, scientists are struggling a little bit to wrap their heads around diabetes because it is a whole body problem, and at the end of the day, you're going to have to understand something about the whole body to really get around it. So there's a ton of work on it, but it has been a struggle to really come up with good new therapies to help people out just for that reason. And just to add to that, the other problem for coming up with good therapies is, again, as an example, cancer. You have cancer, you better do something about it or your time to death is short. Diabetes is not like that. If I'm diagnosed with diabetes, I probably have 30 years statistically to live. If somebody gives me a drug that's going to give me a heart attack in 5 years, that's going to be a problem for me, right? If I have cancer, I take this really nasty drug for a short amount of time and then I stop the drug one way or the other. Diabetes, I have to have a drug that I take for decades. That's a really hard drug to come up with. Just running the clinical trials is going to be tough. You have to run it for forever just to make sure that it doesn't have surprising side effects. So, and that's a subtle point, but that's actually a tough point at getting at new therapies because the clinical trials become crazy expensive and crazy long, and that discourages a lot of drug companies from getting into the problem.
My advice is to be consistent. First, I wouldn't say do it because people are telling you to. Do it because you feel you want to, and that's something you want to do genuinely for yourself. But also look into it on your own. Like, see why it's beneficial. It's just easy for someone to say you should do something, but sometimes you don't know why you should do it. They don't explain why, and you still have a lot of questions on your own that you want to try to answer before you even, take part in changing your lifestyle. So read, find out what it is, why you should eat good, what are the benefits, and go ahead and do it. But consistency is the only way you'll see lasting results.
The best diet I could recommend would be the Mediterranean diet, which is a diet of nothing but nuts and fruits and vegetables.
The local churches and community business centers, because churches have a lot of influences in the neighborhoods, or any religious establishment that cater to a large community. They can easily implement gradual changes and make it beneficial for the neighborhood.